A few days after my birth in 1948, on a smoggy mid-September Wednesday, I was brought home to the tract house in Lakewood my parents had bought in 1946. To be born into that kind of house in that kind of neighborhood hadn't yet become a suburban cliché. The torrent of newcomers to post-war Los Angeles, propelled by defense spending and dreams, hadn't yet reached flood stage. I lived a boy's life there, among white, working-class kids whose accents were colored by the border south from which their parents had migrated to assemble planes at the nearby Douglas Aircraft Plant. I absorbed old habits that assumed white privilege, and others that were so new that my parents and their friends hardly had the language to name them. They would have to read the ads in the Los Angeles Times to know what they wanted. This was not a better time, nor was Lakewood a perfect place. Still, I wish I could hand on, with no inheritance of exclusion, the charmed life that had been given me, with such thoughtless abundance as a child of suburban Los Angeles. I grew up to write about it. I've tried again in this book to understand what it has made of me. Everything missing. When we talk about Los Angeles, we mostly dwell on what has been made of its original elements, its earth, air, and water, and much less on how the city shaped those of us who live here. The form of Los Angeles, critics told us, is grotesque or it's contemptible, and its incoherence ought to be considered a warning and not a model. Angelenos have heard so often that Los Angeles is counterfeit, and the unreality has rubbed off on us. When faced with the homelessness we found in ourselves, we prefer to talk about the climate. Except for the sunshine, the Anglo-possessors of the city after 1850 found little here they recognized as the basis for a home. Mid-19th century Los Angeles was a collection of things Anglo-immigrants missed: year-round rainfall, regular seasons, coal, a canopy of trees, and the fellowship of like-minded white Americans. Los Angeles was a semi-tropical semi-desert, and only semi-familiar. Everything ordinary, in immigrant memory, was subtly estranged. The landscape itself was unnerving. It didn't face the Atlantic and the European shore from which Victorian culture arrived. Instead, it was the alien Pacific and the end of optimistic American wandering westward. Glamour and dread were born from the city's terminal landscape and relentless climate. Geography turned into psychology. Boosters pasted myths over everything that they missed in Los Angeles. A desirable Los Angeles was written into existence before it was sold off. More guides, pamphlets, broadsides, and magazines ballyhooed Los Angeles between 1850 and 1900 than there were Los Angeles residents. By 1920, the Chamber of Commerce had circulated millions of copies along the East Coast and throughout the Midwest. Words were the scrim on which the hoped-for Los Angeles of the boosters was projected. It would be the Wonder City, our Italy, the Mediterranean shores of America, or a Southern California paradise. Never the indifferent piece of occupied Mexico that stubbornly persisted behind the scrim. To Latinx Angelenos, written out of the Anglo sales pitch, climate mattered less than work, access to housing, and the support of communal networks. The city of Anglo desire didn't have a past, and so the boosters supplied it. It was a Spanish fantasy past, what historian Eric Avila calls an ethnic masquerade, in which the fictional Zorro and Ramona dance the fandango, and mission bells call lordly Californios to prayer, while shiftless mestizos doze beneath their sombreros. In flattening the city's history of class antagonism and racial conflict into a Days of the Dons pageant, the fantasy past wrung difference and complexity out of the city's story. Most accounts of Los Angeles still do, generalizing the city's particulars into sprawl and spectacle, or enumerating a few of its social ecologies, or hovering speculatively overhead at an altitude of 5,000 feet.